I still remember the smell of that hospital room. Disinfectant, cold metal, and something else, the faint scent of fading love. That was the day my husband, Arthur Blake, decided he didn't need me anymore. After 40 years of marriage, he left, not for another dream, not for freedom, but for his caregiver. My name is Evelyn Grace, and if you're listening, I want you to know something about betrayal. It doesn't always come loud or violent. Sometimes, it slips in quietly, wearing the voice of someone you once loved. Arthur had fallen ill 3 years before that day. A stroke left half his body weak and his pride even weaker. I spent months by his bedside, feeding him, cleaning him, whispering prayers while the world moved on. But when Vanessa Clark entered our lives, young, pretty, confident, he started to recover in ways that had nothing to do with medicine. At first, I didn't mind her presence. Vanessa worked for the home care agency, a sweet woman in her 30s, always polite and efficient. She called me Mrs. Blake with a kind smile, said she admired how I stayed strong for Arthur. But there was something in her eyes, that flicker of pity, the kind that hides judgment. I ignored it. For love's sake. For vows we made under God. Arthur was everything to me. We built a life from scratch, a little bookstore in town, 2 children, a small house with creaky floors and laughter in the walls. He used to read poetry to me every evening, his voice soft, steady. "You're the heartbeat of my home, Evelyn," he'd say. But when his body grew weak, his ego couldn't bear it. He hated meeting me. He hated the look of compassion in my eyes. The one that used to comfort him now made him feel small. And Vanessa? She gave him something I couldn't, admiration. She looked at him like he was still strong, still desirable, still a man. It started with longer visits, then little favors. A drive to the pharmacy. Private jokes I wasn't included in. One morning, I came home early from the market and found them laughing in the living room, Arthur's hand resting over hers. It looked innocent, but I knew that kind of touch. It wasn't gratitude. It was awakening. When I confronted Arthur later that night, his voice was flat. "You're imagining things, Evelyn. Vanessa is just helping me feel alive again." Alive again. Those words carved into me like glass. A month later, he told me he needed space. Said he'd feel more independent if he moved into an assisted living apartment, conveniently, the same one where Vanessa worked full-time. I stood there, staring at the man who'd once promised me forever, and all I could think was, how quickly love forgets its vows when pride takes the wheel. Our daughter, Lydia, tried to reason with him. "Dad, Mom's done everything for you. You can't just leave." Arthur only looked away. "It's my life, Lydia. I've earned some peace." Peace. As if I was the chaos. The day he left, he wouldn't even let me help him pack. He just rolled his suitcase to the car, Vanessa holding his arm. I watched from the porch, the same porch where he once kissed me goodnight, as he drove away with the woman who'd replaced me. For months, I tried to live quietly. I went to church, tended my garden, pretended I was fine. But loneliness doesn't whisper. It roars in an empty house. Every room echoed his absence. His mug still sat by the sink. His jacket hung by the door. Even the clock seemed to tick slower without his voice filling the air. Lydia called often, trying to cheer me up. She was 28, working as a school counselor. "Mom, you can come stay with me anytime," she'd say. But I didn't want to burden her. I told her I was strong. Elite. Then one night, she showed up unannounced, tears in her eyes. "Mom, you need to see this." She handed me her phone. It was a picture, Arthur and Vanessa at some restaurant, laughing, holding hands. He looked happy. Too happy. "I can't believe he's doing this to you," Lydia whispered. I couldn't either. But more than anger, I felt grief, the kind you can't bury with tears. It's the grief of realizing the person you built your life around stopped seeing you years ago. I didn't call him. I didn't scream. I just folded that photo into my Bible and prayed. I prayed that someday he'd remember the woman who stood by him when no one else did. But the world doesn't wait for prayers. 6 months later, I got a call from Dr. Henry Coleman, Arthur's old physician. Mrs. Blake, he said gently, your husband's not been keeping up with his medication. I tried reaching him, but he won't answer. I thought you should know. My heart raced. Has Vanessa been in touch? I've called the care center. She's listed as his primary contact now. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind swirled with questions. Why wasn't she answering? Was he okay? Did she abandon him the way he abandoned me? 2 days passed. Then 3. Nothing. On the 4th morning, I was making tea when the phone rang. Unknown number. I picked it up and froze. It was Vanessa. Her voice trembled. Evelyn. I didn't know who else to call. I gripped the counter. What happened? It's Arthur, she whispered. He's not breathing right. He's pale, cold. I think something's really wrong. My throat went dry. Call an ambulance. Her reply came faint, shaking. I can't. I didn't know what to do. Please, just come. I felt my world tilt. After all the pain, all the betrayal, she was calling me. Not a doctor. Not a nurse. Me, the wife he left behind. I grabbed my coat and keys, my hands trembling. The road to that apartment blurred through my tears. Every mile felt like a lifetime of broken promises. When I reached the building, Vanessa was standing by the door, pale and frantic. Inside, Arthur lay on the couch, weak, barely conscious. His skin was gray, his breathing shallow. I dropped to my knees beside him. I hadn't heard his voice in nearly a year. But in that moment, it didn't sound like the man who'd left me. It sounded like the boy I once loved, scared, lost human. I turned to Vanessa, voice shaking. Why didn't you call for help sooner? Tears spilled down her face. I was afraid, Evelyn. I didn't know what to do. He told me not to tell anyone. My heart sank. Not even a doctor? She shook her head. And then, as I brushed a damp cloth across his forehead, something caught my eye, a half-empty pill bottle on the table. The label read, "Do not take with alcohol." But beside it sat an open wine glass. I looked at Vanessa, my voice trembling between fury and disbelief. What have you done? Her lips quivered, her eyes darting away. I swear I didn't mean. I stopped her. I didn't want to hear excuses. Because deep down I already knew this wasn't just neglect. This was something darker. And as I held Arthur's cold hand, one thought echoed in my mind. Why would she call me unless she had something to hide? If you've ever loved someone who forgot your worth, stay a little longer. Because what comes next will remind you that karma remembers what people choose to forget. When I saw that half-empty pill bottle beside Arthur's limp hand, my heart froze. Vanessa, I whispered, my voice shaking. You gave him his medicine with wine? She backed away, eyes wide. He wanted it. Said it helped him sleep. I didn't think. I stood up, my breath trembling. You didn't think? He's a heart patient on blood thinners. Arthur groaned softly on the couch. His face looked pale as wax, his breathing shallow. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. Vanessa just stood there, frozen, her mascara streaking down her cheeks. Within minutes, the paramedics arrived. They lifted Arthur onto a stretcher, checking his vitals. I followed them out, but Vanessa stopped me at the door. Evelyn, please, she whispered. Don't tell them I was here. I'll lose my job. I'll lose everything. I turned and stared at her. For a moment, I almost pitied her. But then I remembered the nights I spent alone, crying into my pillow while she shared laughter with my husband. You already lost something far more important, I said quietly. Your soul. At the hospital, I sat in that familiar waiting room, the same one where I once prayed for his recovery years ago. Life has a cruel way of circling back, doesn't it? Dr. Coleman came rushing in an hour later, his face grim. Evelyn, he's stable for now. But his blood pressure dropped dangerously low. It seems the alcohol interfered with his medication. I nodded, swallowing tears. He was drinking again? The doctor sighed. I'm afraid so. And from what I can tell, he hasn't been following his prescriptions for months. Months. My stomach turned. Vanessa had been his full-time caregiver. How could she not know? Or maybe she did. When I stepped into his hospital room, Arthur was asleep, frail, gray, a shadow of the man I once loved. The machines beeped softly beside him, echoing like a distant heartbeat of the past. I sat by his bed, gently holding his hand. His skin felt paper-thin. "Arthur," I whispered, "how did we end up here? You traded a lifetime of love for an illusion, and now, even she's gone." My reflection in the window looked older than I remembered, tired eyes, wrinkled hands that had built a life only to watch it crumble. I thought about the last time we celebrated our anniversary. He'd forgotten the date. I'd laughed it off. "We're getting old," I'd joked. But maybe the truth was his heart had already moved on. Hours later, Lydia rushed in, her face pale.
"Mom."
I came as soon as I heard. "Is he okay?" I nodded weakly. "He's hanging on." She sat beside me, her hand trembling in mine. "Was Vanessa there?" I hesitated.
"Yes."
"She's the one who called me." Lydia frowned. "You? Why you, Mom? Why not the hospital?" "I don't know," I whispered. "But something tells me she didn't call because she cared. She called because she was afraid." Lydia looked at me, confused. Afraid of what? I didn't answer, because deep down I wasn't sure yet, but I could feel it. Fear doesn't come from guilt alone. It comes from knowing something is about to surface. For the next few days, I stayed by Arthur's bedside. He drifted in and out of sleep, sometimes whispering my name, sometimes calling for Vanessa. One night, I heard him mumble, "Don't tell her, don't let her see the papers." I leaned closer. "Arthur? What papers?" But he didn't respond. His eyelids fluttered shut again, sinking into silence. The next morning, I went to his apartment to collect a few things. Vanessa hadn't been there since the incident. The front door was slightly open. I stepped inside cautiously. The air was heavy, stale wine, unwashed dishes, the faint scent of perfume that wasn't mine. I moved through the living room, noticing little changes. My wedding photo was gone from the mantel. Our books replaced by scented candles and glossy magazines. My home, our home, erased one detail at a time. I gathered his clothes, his reading glasses, and his watch. As I was about to leave, something caught my eye. A stack of envelopes on the table. Medical bills unopened. And beneath them, a small brown folder marked insurance and property. I froze. Inside were documents, Arthur's will, life insurance forms, and something else, a handwritten letter addressed to Vanessa. My hands shook as I opened it. "Vanessa, I've made the changes you asked for. The apartment, the savings account, and the policy are now in your name. Please don't tell Evelyn or Lydia. They wouldn't understand. You've given me peace, and I trust you'll take care of things when I'm gone. Arthur." The room spun. My knees nearly buckled. He had changed everything, every last piece of our life together, and given it to the woman who betrayed him. I sank onto the couch, the letter trembling in my hands. My tears fell onto the ink, blurring the words until they looked like ghosts. I wanted to scream, to tear that paper apart. But instead, I sat in silence. Because somewhere in that silence, I realized something even more devastating. This wasn't just betrayal of love. It was betrayal of trust, of family, of me. That evening, I returned to the hospital. Arthur was awake, weak but conscious. I stood by the doorway, holding the letter behind my back. He looked up at me, his eyes hollow. "Evelyn, you came." "I never really left, Arthur," I said softly. "Even when you did." He turned his face away. "You shouldn't have come. Vanessa, she'll handle everything." I took a deep breath. "She already has." His eyes flicked toward me, uncertain. I stepped closer, placing the letter on his chest. "I found it." He blinked, confused at first. Then his face crumpled. "You weren't supposed to see that." "No," I whispered. "I wasn't supposed to see any of this. I wasn't supposed to watch the man I loved destroy everything we built." Tears welled in his eyes. "Evelyn, I thought I was dying. I didn't want to be a burden to you. And giving our life away to a stranger was your way of protecting me?" He didn't answer. His lips quivered, but no sound came. Just then Lydia walked in.
Mom?
What's going on? I turned to her slowly, my face pale. Your father changed everything. The house. The insurance. All of it, to Vanessa. Lydia gasped. He what? Arthur closed his eyes. Please don't make this harder. Harder. I snapped, my voice breaking. You left me for her, and then you gave her everything. What's left to make harder, Arthur? The monitor beeped rapidly as his pulse rose. Dr. Coleman rushed in, telling us to step outside. Lydia and I waited in the hallway, silence pressing between us like thick glass. After what felt like hours, the doctor came out. He's resting again. Try not to upset him. Upset him. The irony stung like salt on a wound. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the hospital window, watching the rain blur the city lights. I thought of every sacrifice, every sleepless night spent praying for him. And in return this. In the morning, Vanessa arrived. Dressed neatly, no trace of guilt in her face. How is he? She asked coolly.
Ist sehr daher.
You've got some nerve showing up here. She smiled faintly. I'm his caregiver, Mrs. Blake. It's my duty. Caregiver? I repeated. You nearly killed him. Her eyes narrowed. Don't act like you're the victim here. He wanted me. He loved me. You just can't stand that he finally chose happiness. That word, happiness, snapped something inside me. Happiness doesn't come from stealing what isn't yours, I said quietly. You didn't love him. You loved what he could give you. She crossed her arms. Believe what you want. He signed everything over willingly. That's all that matters. My voice dropped low. Not when deceit is involved. Not when you manipulate a dying man for money. For the first time, her confident mask cracked. Watch what you're accusing me of, she hissed. Oh, I'm not accusing, I said. I'm proven. Her expression flickered. Fear, guilt, something dark. She turned and walked away, heels clicking like small hammers against the tile. But I noticed something. She left her handbag on the chair, and sticking out of it a small orange prescription bottle. My heart pounded. I reached for it carefully. The label read, Arthur Blake, diazepam. But beneath that label was another, faintly visible where it had been peeled off, Vanessa Clark. My breath caught. I realized in that instant she'd been switching medications. All this time, Arthur hadn't been getting weaker by accident. He'd been poisoned slowly, deliberately, by the very woman he thought loved him. And now, with shaking hands, I held the proof. I looked toward the hospital door where Vanessa had just disappeared and whispered to myself, this time, I won't pray for forgiveness. I'll pray for justice. If you've ever been betrayed but stayed silent, don't. Because in the next part, Evelyn will uncover the truth that changes everything. I sat in the dim hospital corridor, gripping that small orange bottle as though it were the last piece of truth left in my world. The fluorescent lights above hummed softly, and my hands trembled. On the label, her name, Vanessa Clark, peeked faintly beneath Arthur's. The proof of betrayal wasn't hidden anymore. It was right there, cold and real. I had spent months blaming myself for losing my husband, for not being enough, for aging while he chased youth. But at that moment, as I turned the bottle in my palm, I realized he hadn't just drifted away. He had been pulled, slowly,
Carefully.
poisoned by someone who called herself his savior. My chest tightened. My mind screamed to call the police, to tell Dr. Coleman right away. But another voice, quieter, older, whispered, wait. Don't just accuse. Find proof no one can deny. So, I slipped the bottle into my purse and stood. Outside Arthur's room, Vanessa's laughter echoed down the hall. She was talking to a nurse, charming as ever. I watched her, pretending to look at the vending machine as she brushed her golden hair behind her ear and smiled. The same smile that once disarmed my husband, now a weapon sharpened by greed. I turned and walked away. My heart was pounding. That night, at home, I searched for answers. I pulled out Arthur's old medical records, the ones I'd kept in a dusty folder after our separation. His prescriptions were clearly listed, and none of them matched what Vanessa had been giving him lately. She had changed everything: dosage, frequency, even the doctor's name. One name caught my eye: Dr. Marcus Hale. A new physician I'd never heard of. I called the number printed on the sheet. It went straight to voicemail. "Hello," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "This is Evelyn Blake. I'm calling about my husband's treatment. Please call me back. It's urgent."
I didn't sleep that night.
I sat on the couch, staring at the wall, every memory with Arthur flashing through my mind. Our wedding day. The way he used to hum while fixing the garden fence. The night he told me he wanted to leave. "You deserve someone who can still dance," he'd said, his eyes full of guilt. "I've become a burden, Evelyn." But now I saw it clearly. He hadn't left me out of love. He'd been coerced. The next morning, I went back to the hospital. Lydia was already there, sitting beside her father's bed. Arthur was awake, weaker but conscious. His eyes followed me as I walked in, cautious, as though he feared what I'd learned. "Morning," I said softly. He nodded. "You came back. I promised I wouldn't leave again." Lydia stood. "Mom, I'm going to grab some coffee. Want anything?" I shook my head. As soon as she was gone, I leaned in closer to Arthur. "I know, Arthur," I whispered. "I know what she's been doing." His eyes widened. "What do you mean?" I pulled a bottle from my purse and set it on the bedside table. "Your medication. It wasn't yours, was it?"
He stared at it for a long time.
Then, slowly, tears welled in his eyes. "I didn't know. I trusted her. She said Dr. Hale had changed the prescription."
"Dr. Hale?"
I pressed. "There is no Dr. Hale." I checked. His lips trembled. She told me not to question it. Said my old doctor was making mistakes. I thought she was helping me. I clenched my fists. "She wasn't helping you, Arthur. She was killing you." He covered his face with his hands. Oh God, what have I done? For the first time in years, I saw genuine remorse in his eyes. It wasn't the man who left me talking. It was the broken one who finally saw what he'd lost. "I ruined everything," he whispered. "You, Lydia, all for someone who didn't even love me." "She never loved you, Arthur," I said quietly. "She loved what she could take." Just then, the door opened. Vanessa stepped in, holding a bouquet of fresh flowers. Her smile froze when she saw the bottle on the table. "What's that doing here?" she asked sharply. Arthur turned away. I stood up, meeting her gaze. "You tell me, Vanessa. This looks like your prescription, not his." Her face paled. "You've got it wrong." "Oh? Then why is your name under his label?" She laughed nervously. "Printing mistake. You're grasping at straws, Evelyn. You've always been jealous." "Jealous?" I said softly. "Of what? Watching my husband waste away under your care?"
Her jaw tightened.
"You don't know what you're talking about." "I know enough to send this to the police," I said, holding up my phone. "And if anything happens to Arthur again, I will." For a split second, something dark flickered in her eyes. Then she smiled, cold and composed. "You think anyone will believe the bitter ex-wife over a licensed caregiver?" I didn't answer. I just looked at Arthur. His breathing had quickened, his hand gripping the sheets. "Vanessa," he croaked, "just leave." She turned to him, her voice suddenly sweet again. "Arthur, don't listen to her. You know I love you." "Go," he shouted, louder this time. "Get out." The room fell silent. She stared at him, her eyes glistening, not with sorrow, but rage. Then she turned on her heel and stormed out. I exhaled slowly. For the first time, Arthur reached for my hand. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "For everything." I nodded, tears blurring my vision. "Let's just get you better. That's all that matters now." But as I walked out to the hallway, a nurse approached me. "Mrs. Blake, I think you should see this." She handed me a small envelope. Inside was a note, written in hurried handwriting. "You don't know who you're dealing with. She's dangerous. Be careful. A friend." My blood ran cold. I looked up at the nurse, but she shook her head. It was left at the reception. No name. That evening, as I returned home, I noticed my door slightly ajar. My stomach dropped. I pushed it open carefully. The living room lights were on, but everything was eerily quiet. I stepped inside, heart pounding, and saw that my drawers were open, papers scattered across the floor. Someone had been searching for something. Then I saw it. The brown folder, the one containing Arthur's will, was gone. I ran to the phone and called Lydia. "Sweetheart, listen to me. Don't leave Dad alone tonight. And don't let Vanessa near him." "Mom, what's happening?" "Just promise me." I hung up before she could protest. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. Someone had broken into my house. Someone desperate. The next day, I returned to the hospital, exhausted but determined. When I arrived, Arthur's room was empty, his bed neatly made. Panic surged through me. I rushed to the nurse's station. "Where is he? Where's my husband?" The nurse looked confused. "He was discharged this morning." "Discharged? By whom?" "His caregiver, Miss Vanessa Clark. She signed the papers." My knees nearly gave out. No, that's impossible. She doesn't have authorization." "I'm sorry, ma'am," the nurse said gently. "She provided documents signed by her husband." I turned and ran down the hallway, tears blurring my sight. I could barely breathe. She had him. Again. That evening, Lydia called me sobbing. "Mom, Dad's gone. Vanessa took him from the hospital. His phone's off, and she's not answering calls." I gripped the edge of the counter, my voice breaking. "Listen to me, Lydia. We're going to find him." We called the police, filed a report, but the officer's tone was indifferent. "Ma'am, if he left with her willingly, there's not much we can do unless you can prove he's in danger." "Prove he's in danger?" I pulled the prescription bottle from my purse. "Then I'll give you proof." But when the officer took it to the lab, they told me it would take weeks for results. Weeks Arthur didn't have. That night, I sat alone, staring at the empty chair across from me. His chair. The one where he used to read the newspaper every morning. And suddenly, a thought struck me. Vanessa wasn't just after money. She was hiding something bigger. I went through the copies of Arthur's financial documents. One line stood out. A recent transfer of $120,000 to an offshore account, registered under Vanessa Clark and Arthur Blake jointly. She'd planned everything. The romance, the caregiving, the legal signatures. And now she had him isolated, vulnerable, and possibly dying. I grabbed my coat. It was time to find her. I drove through the rain, retracing every place they'd been, until finally, I saw her car parked outside a small rented house at the edge of town. The curtains were drawn, but through a narrow slit, I saw movement. Arthur was lying on a couch, motionless. Vanessa stood beside him, holding a glass. I got out of the car and ran to the door, pounding with both fists. "Vanessa, open this door." No response. "Open it or I'll call the police right now." I screamed. A moment later, the door creaked open. Vanessa stood there, her expression calm and icy. "You shouldn't have come here, Evelyn." I looked past her. Arthur wasn't moving. My heart leapt. "What did you do?" "Nothing," she said, stepping aside. "He was sleeping. You should let him rest." But as I rushed to his side, I noticed the same glass bottle on the table, half empty. My hands shook as I picked it up. It smelled faintly of alcohol and medicine. "Arthur," I whispered, touching his face. His skin was cold, too cold. I turned to her, my voice trembling with rage. "You said you loved him. You killed him." Her smile faded. "He was never going to make it. He didn't want to suffer." "You liar." Before I could speak again, she reached into her pocket and pulled out something. Arthur's will. "It's done, Evelyn. He gave me everything. You can't undo it now." I stepped closer, my eyes blazing. "You may own his things, Vanessa, but you'll never own the truth." She smirked. "The truth won't matter if no one's alive to tell it." And then I saw it, the syringe on the table beside the couch. My blood froze. Before I could move, her hand darted toward it. And that's when I realized if I didn't act now, this story would end tonight. The rain outside beat against the windows like a warning, but I didn't move. My heart thundered in my chest as Vanessa's hand hovered inches above the syringe. The room smelled faintly of antiseptic and fear. "Don't," I said, my voice low but firm. She froze. Her eyes flicked toward me, then to the door behind me, calculating. "You shouldn't be here, Evelyn. This isn't your fight anymore." I stepped forward, closing the distance between us. "It became my fight the moment you started poisoning my husband." Her lips curled. "Poisoning?
Don't be dramatic.
I was helping him, keeping him comfortable. Something you were too busy crying over to do." I stared at her, this woman who had slithered into my home, my family, my life, and realized that she wasn't just cruel. She was empty, a hollow shell feeding off attention, money, control. I lunged for the syringe. She tried to stop me, but I was faster. My hand closed around it, and I flung it across the room. It hit the wall and shattered, spilling clear liquid onto the carpet. Vanessa screamed. "You stupid old woman." I grabbed her arm. "What did you give him? Tell me." "Pain relief," she spat. "That's all he wanted." Arthur stirred faintly on the couch, groaning. His eyelids fluttered. "Evie." My breath caught. I dropped beside him, brushing his hair back. "I'm here, Arthur. Hold on." Vanessa's voice rose, shrill with panic. "You don't understand. He asked me to end it." I looked up sharply. "He would never ask you that." She pointed a trembling finger at him. "He said he couldn't live with the guilt. He begged me to make it stop." I turned back to Arthur. His lips moved weakly.
No.
I didn't. That single whisper shattered her lie. I stood slowly, every ounce of fear burning into fury. "You took advantage of a sick man's shame. You manipulated him. And when he realized what you were doing, you tried to silence him." Her eyes darted around the room. "You can't prove anything." "Maybe not yet," I said, pulling my phone from my pocket. "But this," I tapped the record button, letting her words hang in the air. "This is a good start." Her face drained of color. "Arthur," I said loudly, making sure the phone caught every word. "Did Vanessa ever change your medication without telling your doctor?"
He nodded faintly.
"Yes." "Did she make you sign papers when you weren't in your right mind?" Tears leaked from the corners of his eyes. "Yes." Vanessa lunged for me, but I stepped aside. She stumbled and slammed into the table, knocking over a lamp. The light flickered and went out. In the half-dark, I could hear her breathing, ragged, furious. "You think anyone will listen to some sick old man and his bitter wife?" she hissed. I raised my phone like a weapon. "They'll listen to the recording. They'll listen to the lab results from your fake prescriptions. And they'll listen to the nurse who warned me you were dangerous." Her face twisted. "You don't have proof of that." I took a step closer. "You're right."
I don't yet.
"But I will." Outside, the wail of sirens pierced the night. Her eyes widened. "You called them." "I did," I said calmly, "before I came in." She bolted toward the back door, but I grabbed her wrist. "It's over, Vanessa." She twisted free and ran. I followed, the rain drenching us both, as we burst into the yard. Headlights flashed across the driveway, police cars skidding to a halt. She stopped, frozen like a deer in the light. For a heartbeat, I saw the fear beneath her rage, the face of a woman cornered by her own lies. Then she turned and sprinted toward the woods. The officers shouted, chasing her into the darkness. I collapsed to my knees, soaked and trembling. A hand touched my shoulder. "Mrs. Blake," one of the officers said gently. "Are you hurt?"
No, iwi sparat.
"But my husband, he needs help. Please go to him." They rushed inside. I stayed outside, rain pouring over me, feeling the weight of years lift off my chest, just enough to breathe again. Minutes later, paramedics carried Arthur out on a stretcher. His eyes found mine through the rain. "You came back for me," he murmured. "I never stopped," I said softly. "You just stopped looking." He tried to smile, but his lips trembled. Evie, I don't deserve you. Maybe not, I said, brushing a tear from his cheek, but I'm here anyway. They loaded him into the ambulance. I followed in my car, the flashing lights ahead guiding me through the storm. At the hospital, Dr. Coleman met me at the entrance. Evelyn, my God, what happened? I handed him the orange bottle. Run every test you can. She's been giving him something that isn't his medication. He took it, eyes darkening. We'll find out. Hours passed. I sat outside the ICU, shivering in my wet clothes. Lydia arrived just before dawn, pale and wide-eyed. Mom, is he?
He's alive, I said.
Barely. She sank beside me, covering her face. I should have seen it sooner. No, I said quietly. She fooled us all. Dr. Coleman came out at sunrise. He's stable. Whatever she gave him, it was strong, but you got there just in time. Relief hit me like a wave. I covered my mouth, sobbing silently. Do the police have her? Lydia asked. He nodded grimly. They caught her trying to leave town. She's in custody. I closed my eyes, whispering, thank God. But inside, I felt no victory. Only exhaustion. Later that morning, Detective Harris, a tall, calm man with kind eyes, came to take my statement. I told him everything, from the false prescriptions to the will. When I finished, he said quietly, You saved his life, Mrs. Blake. That's not something many people could have done. I didn't do it alone, I said. I had help from the truth. He smiled faintly. That's the kind of help we all need. Days turned into weeks. Arthur slowly improved. He spoke little, but when he did, his words were gentle, remorseful. One afternoon, as the sunlight spilled through his hospital window, he reached for my hand. Evie, I don't expect forgiveness. But I want you to know, I remember everything now. The things I said when I left, they weren't true. You were never the problem. Tears filled my eyes. You were sick, Arthur. We both were. Just in different ways. He squeezed my hand weakly. I loved you. I just forgot what that meant. I nodded. Maybe love isn't about remembering, but about showing up when it matters. He smiled faintly, then drifted into sleep. When I stepped into the hallway, I saw Detective Harris waiting. The lab results came back, he said. You were right. The medication contained sedatives and toxins, enough to weaken him over time. I closed my eyes, whispering. She wanted him gone. Maybe not just him, he said softly. The will she made him sign. It left everything to her, but now it's void. She forged his signature. I exhaled shakily. So it's over.
For her, yes, he said.
For you, that depends on what you want to do next. That night, I walked into Arthur's room again. The machines beeped softly beside him. The storm had passed, and the world outside glowed with the soft orange of evening. I sat beside him, holding his hand, and whispered, It's almost over, Arthur. Justice is coming. Rest now. He stirred slightly, murmuring, Evie. I smiled sadly. I'm here. For the first time in years, peace settled in the room. Thin and fragile, but real. The lies were unraveling, and truth had finally found its way through the cracks. But deep inside, I knew one last reckoning still awaited. Because even though Vanessa was behind bars, something inside me wasn't free yet. I still had to face what her betrayal had awakened in me. The bitterness, the regret, the love I'd buried beneath anger. As I sat there, watching the slow rise and fall of Arthur's chest, I whispered to the quiet room, Tomorrow, I'll forgive him. Maybe even her. But not tonight. Outside, the rain had stopped. The silence that followed felt heavy, like the calm before the final storm. And I knew the real closure hadn't come yet. But it was close. When the day of Vanessa's trial arrived, the world outside the courthouse seemed deceptively calm. The autumn air carried the scent of dry leaves and rain-soaked concrete. I stood at the steps, clutching my shawl around me, feeling the weight of every memory pressing down. Arthur was gone. He passed away peacefully 2 nights before the hearing, his hand in mine, his final words barely a whisper. Thank you for coming back. There had been no bitterness in his tone, only peace, as if the burden he'd carried for years had finally lifted. And in that quiet, I'd realized something. I wasn't here today to avenge him. I was here to protect the truth he died defending. Inside the courtroom, the air felt cold and still. Vanessa sat at the defense table, wearing the same smugness that once fooled me. Her blonde hair was pinned neatly, her eyes flickering with false confidence. She looked like someone trying to convince herself she hadn't already lost. When she saw me, her expression faltered for just a second. Maybe she hadn't expected me to come. Maybe she thought grief would silence me. But grief, I had learned, doesn't silence you. It clarifies you. The prosecutor began to speak, recounting the medical reports, the forged documents, the fake prescriptions. Each word was like a hammer striking stone. My hands trembled, not with fear, but with release. When it was my turn to testify, I walked slowly to the stand. My knees ached, but I stood tall. Mrs. Blake, the lawyer said gently, can you tell the court, in your own words, why you believe the defendant harmed your husband? I took a deep breath, looking at Vanessa, not as a monster, but as a broken reflection of everything unchecked greed can do to a soul. She wanted control, I said softly. Arthur trusted her because she made him feel seen. I don't hate her for that. We all want to feel seen, especially when we're weak. But she used that trust to manipulate him, to make him doubt himself, and me. And when he became sick enough not to fight back, she used his silence as her shield. Vanessa shifted uncomfortably. Do you feel anger toward her? The lawyer asked. I paused, then smiled sadly. I did. For a long time. But now, I feel pity. Because when she took him from me, I lost my husband for a few years. But when she lost him, she lost herself entirely. That's a worse punishment than anything this court could give. A hush fell over the room. Even the judge looked moved. When I stepped down, I didn't look at Vanessa again. I didn't need to. 2 hours later, the verdict came. Guilty on all counts: fraud, abuse, and attempted manslaughter. She'd spend the next 20 years behind bars. People in the courtroom whispered. Lydia squeezed my hand, tears in her eyes. It's over, Mom. But I shook my head gently.
No, darling.
It's just finished. There's a difference between something being over and something being finished. Over means it ended. Finished means you learned from it. And I had. Weeks passed. The house felt emptier than ever, but not hollow, just quieter, as if it too were healing. Arthur's photo sat by the window, the morning light always finding its way to his smile. Sometimes I caught myself talking to him. You'd hate the wallpaper I picked, I'd say, or the garden looks better without that old fence, don't you think? And sometimes, when the wind moved softly through the curtains, I almost heard him answer. Lydia visited often. She'd bring her daughter, little Rosie, who reminded me of the woman I once was: curious, loud, full of dreams. One afternoon, Rosie found an old letter in the attic. Grandma, what's this? She asked, waving the yellowed envelope. My heart skipped. I took it gently, recognizing the shaky handwriting, Arthur's. Where did you find it? In the wooden box under the quilts, she said. Can I read it? I hesitated, then nodded. Go ahead, sweetheart. She read aloud, her small voice filling the room. Evelyn, if you ever find this, it means I'm too much of a coward to say it to your face. You were right. About everything. I thought I was chasing freedom when I left, but all I found was emptiness. Vanessa made me feel young again, but she also made me feel small. You were the only one who ever made me feel like a man worth something. I don't know if you'll ever forgive me, but I hope someday you'll remember me as more than my mistakes. Love always, Arthur. By the time Rosie finished, my cheeks were wet. Grandma, are you sad? She asked softly. I smiled, brushing her hair back.
No, sweetheart. I'm grateful.
Some people spend their whole lives waiting for an apology. I got mine, even if it came a little late. That night, I sat by the fireplace with Lydia. She looked at me quietly for a while before saying, You loved him till the end, didn't you? Yes, I said simply. But love isn't always gentle. Sometimes it's a wound you tend every day until it becomes a scar. And one morning, you wake up and realize it doesn't hurt anymore. It just reminds you that you survived. She nodded, eyes glistening. I hope I can be that strong someday. You already are, I said. You opened your home when I had nowhere to go. You reminded me that love doesn't always come from the person you expect. It comes from the people who stay. She leaned on my shoulder, and for a while, we said nothing. The fire crackled softly, and the clock ticked on the mantel. Outside, snow began to fall, the first of the season. A few months later, I visited Arthur's grave. The cemetery was quiet, blanketed in white. I brought a single lily, his favorite flower, and laid it against the stone. I thought I'd hate you forever, I whispered. But hate takes too much strength, and I've learned to use mine for better things. I stood there for a while, letting the wind carry away the ache. Rest now, I murmured. We both did our part. As I turned to leave, I saw an elderly man struggling to push his wheelchair through the snow. I hurried over, helping him up the path. Thank you, he said, smiling weakly. Don't mention it, I replied. When he looked at me, his eyes were full of warmth, the same kind Arthur's used to have when we first met. People don't help much these days, he said. You must have a kind heart. I smiled. Not kind, just healed. He chuckled softly, and for a moment, the world felt lighter. That night, I wrote in my journal, a habit I'd picked up after Arthur's passing. My hands trembled slightly, but my words flowed steady. Love is not a possession. It's a promise to care, even when care no longer benefits you. Betrayal doesn't end love. It tests it. And forgiveness doesn't excuse pain. It transforms it. I used to think my story ended when Arthur left. But I see now, it only began when I chose to live without resentment. He left me once. But when he needed saving, fate sent me back, not for him, but for myself. I closed the journal and stared out the window. The moon hung low, casting silver light across the empty chair by the fire, the one that used to be his. For the first time in years, it didn't make me ache. It made me smile, because life had gone on and so had I. And if anyone ever asked me how I survived heartbreak twice in one lifetime, I'd tell them this. You don't survive it by fighting the pain. You survive it by forgiving yourself for loving deeply in a world that sometimes forgets how. As I turned off the lamp, I whispered to the quiet room one last time, Good night, Arthur. Wherever you are, I hope you found your peace. Because I finally found mine. Some hearts break to remind us how strong love truly is.